Good afternoon, I'm Jacqueline Felgate. It's 4 o'clock in Melbourne and these are our top stories. Political bombshell, Gladys Berejiklian quits as New South Wales Premier over a corruption investigation. Plus, mandatory vaccinations for all permitted workers as construction is given the green light to return. And a horror night on our roads with 4 killed and 2 others fighting for life.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Jacqueline Felgate.
First at 4, it's been an extraordinary day of major developments, including a political bombshell. Gladys Berejiklian has resigned as Premier of New South Wales and will leave Parliament. The Corruption Commission today revealed it's investigating her for a possible breach of public trust.
Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do. My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time. But the timing is completely outside of my control, as the ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history.
We'll hear more about the outgoing New South Wales Premier shortly. But back here, all authorised workers will need to be vaccinated against coronavirus. If your job requires you to leave home, you have 2 weeks to receive a first dose vaccine. Blake Johnson has the details. Blake, workers will need to be fully vaccinated by the end of November.
They will, Jackie. This affects hundreds of thousands of workers not previously under vaccine mandates. The Premier says it's a must if we're going to do all we can to stop hospitals being overwhelmed. Teachers were already under that mandate and had planned a protest about it today at various locations, including Geelong and Mordialloc. 2 people were arrested in Moonee Ponds, the crowd quickly dispersing at that location. At least 1 counter-protester was in Mordialloc telling people they shouldn't expect medical help if they get sick from COVID after choosing to stay unvaccinated. Authorised workers in the fitness, hospitality and retail industries, among many others, will now also have to get vaccinated if they wish to work.
This is incredibly important. The good news is that many of those around 1 million to 1.25 million authorised workers will already have had a first dose. A bunch of them will have had 2 doses. This is about making sure that we go that extra mile to protect the roadmap to opening.
Also announced today, construction can resume next week, but with strict limits on staff numbers and a vaccine requirement. Each site must have a trained COVID marshal and a maximum of 6 workers for small jobs. Large jobs can have 50% of staff on site if tea rooms are COVID safe and everyone is vaccinated. Victoria recorded 1,143 COVID cases today. We are at 81% single dose, 50% double dose.
Blake Johnson, thank you. Let's get more now on the shock resignation of New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian over a corruption investigation. Paul Caddick has the story.
It's been an extraordinary few hours here in New South Wales after the Premier's shock announcement that she would be quitting the office and quitting politics altogether. Gladys Berejiklian said she would be standing down after the Independent Commission Against Corruption revealed it was investigating her conduct. MPs standing aside while the subject of police or corruption investigations was a standard that she had set.
It pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier. In order to allow the new leader and government a fresh start, I'll also resign from the New South Wales Parliament. I love my job and I love serving the community, but I have been given no option.
The ICAC revealing she'll be grilled about the awarding of 2 grants to the Wagga Wagga electorate of her former boyfriend, Daryl Maguire, and whether that was a breach of public trust.
I state categorically I've always acted with the highest level of integrity. History will demonstrate that I've always executed my duties, again, with the highest level of integrity for the benefit of the people of New South Wales.
The Premier hit out at the timing of the ICAC's announcement, given the pandemic, with the state just days away from starting to open up as vaccination rates approach 70%.
My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time. The ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has called her a, quote, dear friend who has displayed heroic qualities in the job. Victoria's Premier Dan Andrews describing her as a person of integrity. The favourites to take over at this stage include Planning Minister Rob Stokes, Western Sydney Minister Stuart Ayres and Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, when MPs meet on Tuesday to decide who will succeed New South Wales' outgoing 45th Premier, Gladys Berejiklian.
For more now on construction's return, let's go to Rebecca Casson from the Master Builders. Thanks so much for joining us, Rebecca. How's the industry reacted to today's announcement?
Look, very positive today, especially given that we were very concerned about the high number of COVID cases announced yesterday. We did actually think that that wasn't going to be good news for our sector today, but there's some very happy people today who are very much looking forward to getting back to work, but not forgetting that there are many still in our industry, renovation sector particularly, that are still not permitted to work. So we're very much focused on those right now.
Tradies are once again going to be able to move between the city and regional areas for work as long as they're tested at least twice a week. Is that reasonable?
Yes, look, there have been some concerns about the transmission between Melbourne, metropolitan Melbourne and regional areas, and this is a safeguard as well. So our industry did have that mandatory vaccination come in very recently, but for many weeks now, our industry has been put on notice around getting vaccinated. So I was down on a site in Geelong earlier on today, spoke to quite a few workers down there that are getting vaccinated on site by Incolink, and they do vaccination and testing. And so our industry is very well used to that at the moment.
And there are still obviously those strict capacity limits on sites. Is that enough to kickstart construction again, given how small some of those limits are?
Look, there's been a lot of feedback about that. The reality is that, especially given the massive numbers yesterday, we feel very fortunate to be going back to work next week. And the reality...
All right, we seem to have lost...
No work, and we're very...
Yeah, we do seem to have lost Rebecca there. We'll wrap it up there. Rebecca, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. There are grave warnings this afternoon from doctors fearful Victorians suffering from treatable conditions will die due to pressure on our hospitals. Let's hear now from the Director of Emergency Medicine at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, Dr Mark Pudland.
This week it's really starting to tip. Things are filling up. We're looking for where we can expand to go to the next phase of the plan and the next phase, and we're trying to plan 3 and 4 phases ahead because we feel like we're heading up to the difficult times now. The thing that really worries me, if we let this get out of control, and the controls are really in the community's hands to some degree, the concern is that you crash your car somewhere out in the road visiting friends for Christmas, and there's no helicopter comes and gets you because they're busy with COVID, or they come and get you but there's no trauma centre to take you to. That would be my nightmare, that we're not able to respond to the things that people really deserve and need and count on us for.
It's been a horror night on Melbourne's roads. 4 people have been killed and 2 others are fighting for life. Police say the sedan was driving out of control and the victims weren't wearing seatbelts when it collided head-on with a small truck. Cassie Zervos has more.
A 16-year-old boy was behind the wheel of a horror crash that happened at this intersection at 7:30 last night. A sedan was travelling east along Doherty's Road in Truganina when it smashed head-on with a small truck near Forsyth Road. 2 people were killed at the scene, 2 others were taken to hospital but sadly died late last night. And 2 others remain fighting for their lives this afternoon at the Royal Melbourne Hospital.
The male who was driving the car was around 16 years of age, obviously without a licence, obviously extremely inexperienced. Last night's weather was really challenging. There are suggestions of speed and inappropriate driving. Families have been devastated. Young lives have been snuffed out, and yet we see this behaviour happening time and time again.
To think that 4 people died right here, it's just horrible, horrible. It could be my wife and family.
The driver of the truck was taken to hospital for observation.
The poor old truck driver who's driving along doing his job and has been involved in just a terrible incident that's claimed a number of lives.
Locals say the road is notorious for speeding motorists who often run red lights.
It's lawless out here. There's no policing, there's no cameras on the lights. It was always going to happen.
Detectives from the Major Collisions Investigation Unit are now piecing together the final moments leading up to this horror smash.
The Premier has announced isolation protocols will be changed for supermarkets that become exposure sites. It's after many of Victoria's major supermarkets have been forced to reduce opening hours and are left with bare shelves as staff are forced into isolation. Nearly 50,000 Coles and Woolworths staff statewide have been forced to spend 2 weeks at home in the past 3 months due to a colleague testing positive, but not one has subsequently caught the virus. The NRL Grand Final hangs in the balance this afternoon with 2 new local cases in Queensland. There won't be a lockdown yet, but authorities haven't ruled out more restrictions.
The fundamental reason we are not in lockdown is because we do not have any seeding or unlinked community transmission. If we do see any unlinked community transmission, I'm quite sure Dr. Young will not hesitate to recommend a lockdown.
At this particular point in time, where all systems go for Sunday to play in front of 39,000 fans.
There have been a record 15 COVID deaths in Sydney and 864 new cases. Australia's international border will reopen from next month. Fully vaccinated return travellers will be able to quarantine at home for 7 days in states that have reached key vaccination targets. Here's Jennifer Beshwati.
Well, it looks like Australia will rejoin the rest of the world much sooner than expected. New rules will apply that will allow international travel and relaxed quarantine requirements for those who've had 2 doses of a TGA-recognised COVID vaccine.
7-day home quarantine for Australian citizens and permanent residents fully vaccinated with a vaccine approved for use in Australia or recognised by the TGA.
14-day hotel quarantine continues for anyone not vaccinated or if they've had an unapproved vaccine.
We said to Australians, we get to 80%, you can leave the country and you can come back again. If you're overseas, you should be able to come back if you're a fully vaccinated Australian resident or citizen.
While each state will reopen at different times, given some will reach the 80% vaccination rate earlier than others, it's expected the new international travel system will commence in November.
Once changes are made in November, the current overseas travel restrictions related to COVID-19 will be removed. We'll be working towards complete quarantine-free travel for certain countries, such as New Zealand, when it is safe to do so.
Some states haven't committed to reopening their borders, even at an 80% vaccination level. Premiers are meeting at National Cabinet today to discuss the matter further.
There's a hunt for a sex predator in Mornington. Coming up, police release CCTV of the man they're looking for. Also, the sentence for a police officer who raped and killed a woman in the UK. And why Facebook bosses faced a public grilling. We're back soon here on 7 and 7+. Taking a live look at the city this afternoon here on 7 News. It's 19 degrees outside right now with thunderstorms in the area. Jane Bunn will be here with the forecast soon. Police have released CCTV of the man they're hunting over a sexual assault in Mornington. The victim was pushing a pram along a track near the Esplanade when she was attacked. The man then ran off towards Main Street. It happened around 1:30 in the afternoon on September 14. The police officer who kidnapped, raped and murdered UK woman Sarah Everard has been sentenced to life in prison. Former London police officer Wayne Couzens has been described as a coward after abducting and killing the 33-year-old under the guise of an arrest. Europe Bureau Chief Hugh Whitfeld reports from London.
Sarah Everard's family say they're very pleased with the sentence handed to a man who abused his position as a police officer to lure Sarah Everard into his vehicle in handcuffs under the guise of COVID regulations before raping, killing and torching the body of the 33-year-old. A judge today describing Wayne Couzens as grotesque, who misused his role as a police officer, eroding public confidence in police, before handing a whole-of-life sentence to Couzens. He is never to be released with no entitlement to parole. Sarah Everard's family saying, "We are very pleased Wayne Couzens has received a full life sentence and will spend the rest of his life in jail. Nothing can make things better, nothing can bring Sarah back, but knowing he will be imprisoned forever brings some relief." There is pressure now, though, on the Metropolitan Police, who failed, it seems, to pick up on the warning signs. Couzens' nickname among his colleagues was the rapist. He'd been investigated before for indecent exposure.
This man has brought shame on the Met. Speaking frankly, as an organisation, we have been rocked. I am so sorry.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner fending off calls for her resignation. The British Home Secretary describing Couzens as a monster. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying the case was sickening.
Facebook bosses have faced a public grilling in US Congress overnight. They were forced to answer allegations they knew their app Instagram was harmful to mental health and sought to bury the evidence. US correspondent David Woodward has the story.
Good afternoon. Well, it was a fiery bipartisan grilling in Congress today as representatives rounded on Instagram and its parent company Facebook for fueling a teen mental health crisis.
Instagram is that first childhood cigarette meant to get teens hooked early.
The attack, fueled by recent leaked internal reports revealing the social media giant was aware of the negative impact it was having on teenagers, particularly girls.
This research is not a bombshell. It's not causal research. It's in fact just directional research that we use for product changes.
This research is a bombshell. It is powerful, gripping, riveting evidence.
One congressman even admitted to posing as a 13-year-old girl online to expose how easily dark forces fed on childhood vulnerabilities.
We now know that Facebook routinely puts profits ahead of kids' online safety.
We do not trust you with influencing our children.
Mark Zuckerberg, represented by his chief safety officer, hit back.
The research showed that many teens say that Instagram is helping them with heart issues that are so common to being a teen.
The company on the back foot, but declaring it's preparing to launch a new range of online child protections to the app used by more than 1 billion people worldwide.
Coming up, the Bombers land their man, plus a tall tiger finds a new home on the Gold Coast. Also, the massive clean-up from a devastating tornado. And later, dozens of patients caught up in a vaccine bungle at a surgery in Melbourne's east. You're watching 7 News, live from Melbourne. Time for sport now with Andrew McCormack. Macca, footy's free agency period is off and running.
That's right, Jack. A pair of players have found new homes in the opening hours of the free agency period. Richmond's Mabior Chol will head to the Gold Coast on a 4-year deal that's just been announced, while Essendon landed lockdown Crows defender Jake Kelly, who will initially live alongside brother Will, who plays for the Pies.
It'll be quite interesting. Anzac Day morning, waking up and, hopefully playing against him. So, I'm thrilled to finally get back and see my mum again. She was in tears when I told her that I was coming home.
Kelly started his career alongside Bombers coach Ben Rutten in Adelaide. Australia continues its search for quick wickets on day 2 on the Gold Coast. Indian opener Smriti Mandana brought up triple figures and went on to post the highest ever score by a visiting women's player down under before the Aussies finally got the breakthrough.
Got one, finally. McGrath's been stationed there a while and Mandana's knock comes to an end.
A short time ago, India was 3 for 219. Over in the IPL, Josh Hazlewood pushed his case for a spot in Australia's T20 World Cup squad later this month. The Test vice-captain was man of the match for ladder leaders Chennai, taking 3 wickets against Hyderabad.
Shouldn't I? Gone. Doesn't matter, who cares? Moeen Ali.
The legendary MS Dhoni smashed a 6 out of the ground, if you don't mind, to seal the 6-wicket win for Chennai, booking their place in the IPL playoffs. The A-League has pulled off one of its biggest signings yet. Liverpool cult hero Daniel Sturridge has put pen to paper on a 1-year deal with Perth Glory for the upcoming season. The 32-year-old scored 76 goals in a glittering Premier League career. And it's not just the city of Philadelphia that has turned on Ben Simmons. The 76ers' biggest star, Joel Embiid, delivered some home truths to the Aussie who wants out.
Our teams have always been built around his needs. The situation is weird, disappointing, borderline kind of disrespectful to all the guys that are out here.
Simmons is contracted for another 4 years, but hasn't reported for pre-season training. Philly, supposed to be the city of brotherly love in the States,
Didn't
but
get much
there's
there.
not a whole lot of love for Ben Simmons at the moment. So.
No, but great to see the trade period beginning and
It's
some
free
big
agency
moves
today.
Free agency.
Yeah, a couple of players moving, so we'll see more of those. Tommy Brown, who's had a few days off after working about a month straight over the final series in the grand final. He's back from Perth, and we'll have the latest with Tom Brown on those free agency moves tonight at 6 o'clock.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Megan. A massive clean-up has begun for families in regional New South Wales after a tornado hit with devastating effect. Homes were ripped apart as residents took shelter anywhere they could.
It hit the house. It just seemed to sit on the house. It took the roof. It just tin flying everywhere. The trampoline went flying. There was just debris flying everywhere.
The powerful tornado carved a 25-kilometre path through the area, injuring 2 people. It's been an extraordinary day as Gladys Berejiklian quit as Premier of New South Wales. More on that is just ahead. Also, details on when authorised workers need to have their first jab. Dozens of patients caught up in a vaccine mistake, and Flight Centre threatening legal action to states refusing to open their borders. We're back in just a few minutes.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Jacqueline Philgate.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, Gladys Berejiklian is no longer Premier of New South Wales. She resigned following the announcement of a new investigation into her conduct by the anti-corruption watchdog.
The people of this state need certainty as to who their leader is during the challenging times of the pandemic. Therefore, it pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier. My resignation will take effect as soon as the New South Wales Liberal Party can elect a new parliamentary leader.
Gladys Berejiklian will also quit Parliament altogether. There are major changes to Victoria's vaccine mandate. All authorised workers will need to have had their first dose by October 15, and they'll need to be fully vaccinated by November 26.
This is about making sure that we go that extra mile to protect the roadmap to opening, to protect the 26th of October or perhaps even a few days earlier, and to make sure that we can open, be free.
Also announced today, the construction sector can reopen from next Tuesday. Large sales sites can operate at 25%. There are 1,143 new cases today, and sadly, 3 people have died. Dozens of patients have been caught up in a vaccine mistake, potentially injected with saline instead of the Pfizer vaccine. The surgery in Melbourne's East has apologised. Georgia Comensoli has more.
Good afternoon. Luckily for the Deep Dean surgery, the only patients affected by this mistake were those seen between 1 and 1:30 on Sunday. The doctor's surgery say the mistake was made when measuring out doses of the Pfizer vaccine for the afternoon. All doses were diluted with saline, which means some of the doses were likely saline only, containing no vaccine. 30 patients were jabbed within that appointment slot. 17 were there for their first dose, while 13 were there for their second. The error was picked up that day, and both the Health Department and surveillance of adverse effects following vaccination in the community were contacted. In a statement, Deep Dean Surgery say they've apologised and they've reviewed their protocols to make sure that this mistake never happens again.
For more on Victoria's COVID situation, we're joined by infectious diseases physician, Associate Professor Sanjaya Senanaika. Thanks as always for joining us, Doctor. The Victorian Government will make it mandatory for all permitted workers to have at least one jab by October 15. What impact do you think this will have on the outbreak?
Look, we know that vaccination is having an impact on the outbreak if we look to New South Wales, where we still think the compliance level with restrictions isn't that great, possibly around 50%. So the fact that they're seeing cases falling in recent times reflects the impact of vaccination. So getting as many people vaccinated as possible is a great idea, particularly those essential workers who are moving and mixing about.
And you mentioned New South Wales and their vaccine coverage and the cases coming down there. When do you think our vaccine coverage will start to have an impact on the daily case numbers and hospitalisations here?
Look, it is hard to tell. If there is some compliance with restrictions, Victoria is almost at 50% of the population over the age of 16 who are fully vaccinated. So hopefully in the next few weeks we will see that. But of course, if there are large illegal gatherings and super spreading events, that might overcome the benefits of vaccination, at least in the short term.
And when you talk about that short term, we obviously had that huge spike yesterday as a result of those grand final parties. When will we see that impact? Do we expect case numbers to go up again like that over the next week or so?
Look, it's hard to know if they'll go up a lot more, Jackie, but generally when we're seeing a plateauing of cases, that plateau takes about a couple of weeks. So we may see numbers like this for a couple of weeks before they go down.
And of course, the other big news of the day is New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian resigning. What impact do you think this will have on the way New South Wales handles their COVID situation?
Look, it may not have an impact, but the reality is this. COVID, the pandemic, lockdowns are a source of great uncertainty and angst. And the more experience you have with that triumvirate in your state or territory, so the Chief Minister, Premier, the Chief Medical Officer or Chief Health Officer and the Health Minister, that's just so important. So losing such a senior figure at such a critical juncture in the roadmap out of COVID for New South Wales is worrying. And hopefully the successor to the Premier will be just as good. But of course, they don't have the same relationship with the Chief Health Officer, and they may have their own style of leadership, and they may have different thoughts on how New South Wales opens up. So we'll see.
Yeah, very interesting time ahead. And Premier Daniel Andrews here today mentioned that he was looking at that New South Wales-Victoria border and making an announcement about that early next week. Do you think it's time, given both the case numbers that we both have, to open up between the states?
Look, I think a lot will also depend on the Victorian numbers that we are seeing in the next few days and the New South Wales numbers, particularly regionally, because although Sydney is going down, we're hearing about outbreaks in regional New South Wales. So I think those factors will come into play. So we'll just have to wait and see for a bit longer.
Sanjaya Senanayake, thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Jackie.
There's chaos across the tram network this afternoon after a driver tested positive. Travellers are being warned to expect cancellations, with employees at Yarra Trams Essendon and City depots isolating. It's impacting 4 routes. They include the 57, 58, 59 and 82. Most drivers are secondary contacts and are expected to return to work after receiving a negative test result. It's been a tragic night on Melbourne's roads, with 4 people killed and 2 others fighting for life. Coming up, police explain what went horribly wrong. Plus, a new drug listed on the PBS, bringing hope to those with rheumatoid arthritis. And the homecoming for triumphant D's players. We're back soon from our Dockland studio right here on 7. It's been a tragic night on Melbourne's roads, with 4 people killed and 2 others fighting for life after a crash in Melbourne's west. A sedan collided head-on with a truck at Truganina.
It looks as though the male who was driving the car was around 16 years of age, obviously without a licence, obviously extremely inexperienced. Last night's weather was really challenging. There are suggestions of speed and inappropriate driving. And then you look at the poor old truck driver who's driving along doing his job and has been involved in just a terrible incident.
Police are also investigating a separate fatal crash at Mount Waverley early this morning. A new treatment listed on the PBS is hoped to bring relief to thousands of rheumatoid arthritis sufferers. Just 1 pill a day can help control flare-ups. Estelle Greeping has more.
Sufferers of rheumatoid arthritis have welcome news. A new treatment is now available to them. Rinvoq has been listed on the PBS for adults living with psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis, which affects the spine. Together, the diseases affect more than 170,000 Australians.
These conditions are debilitating. They have both a mental and physical, obviously, effect on the individual. And so now we have a further treatment option to improve their symptoms and quality of life.
There are times when I've been at my kitchen top and just literally collapsed on the floor. It's like a knife, a dull knife, just going into your hips. So I was going from chiros to physios to osteos, not knowing what was wrong with me.
The treatment works by blocking signals that cause inflammation in the body. It's hoped it'll bring relief to patients who can't take the more commonly used methotrexate.
Not everybody responds to a certain medication. We can't predict at this stage who will respond to which treatment, and therefore we need a number of medications in order to optimise the patient's care.
Just the 1 tablet a day is great. It was a game changer.
With the new PBS listing, a script of Rinvoq will set patients back $41.
Triumphant Melbourne Demons fans have been reunited with their families. This video was posted to social media of Jack Viney and daughter Miller.
People would give their right arm and put that on.
Oh, that's so cute. The 2021 Premiers touched down in Melbourne yesterday afternoon. Captain Max Gawn carried the cup off the plane. They're now facing the reality of life in lockdown again. Australia's travel ban to be lifted sooner than expected. Up next, we hear from the Melbourne Airport CEO. What Victorians need to know before booking flights. And just how much house prices have increased over the last year. Stay with us here on 7, we're across Victoria.
Know the headlines as they break. Know the stories as they happen. With 7news.com.au, know the news now.
Australia will rejoin the rest of the world sooner than expected. The ban on international travel is set to be lifted next month. New South Wales will be the first to open up as they reach 80% double dose, allowing fully vaccinated travellers to quarantine at home for 7 days. For more now, we're joined by Melbourne Airport CEO Lyle Strambey. Thanks so much for joining us, Lyle. What's your reaction to the move today?
Oh, good afternoon. Look, we are really excited and clearly we are ready to go as an airport to reopen to international travel as soon as humanly possible. I would just counsel, though, just a little bit of concern around expectations on the rate that we will reopen, because there's quite a few things to work through just yet.
Can you talk us through the main stumbling blocks that you see then?
Look, there's a couple of things we need to get clear. Is what will the states impose as their particular restrictions over and above what the Commonwealth has already announced. I think it goes more, though, to what are the airlines likely to do. We have to remember that more than 70% of these international seats offered to Australia are provided by international carriers. And those carriers are already opening up their services to other marketplaces. And so we have to go in and compete for their attention with carriers that have already allocated their aircraft.
So are you concerned as well then that the Victorian government could potentially drag its feet when it comes to allowing returning passengers here in Victoria?
I think Australia does risk being left behind, and I think at a state level we want to make sure that whatever requirements are put in place for international travel to make it safe are consistent with what's being offered elsewhere, particularly across Australia.
And speaking of across Australia, what sort of impacts are the state border closures having?
Oh, look, altogether, the impact's been enormous on the airport. We would normally expect 100,000 passengers a day through the airport, and we're averaging around 1,000 to 2,000 passengers a day, which is just enormous to us. So huge impact. Again, though, really encouraged to hear a number of states saying that they will be open in time for Christmas, which is terrific for all of us.
Yeah, I think we've all got our fingers crossed. And Flight Centre is considering legal action against state governments that refuse to open up at 80% vaccination. Would Melbourne Airport consider getting involved in a similar legal fight?
Oh, look, it's an interesting move, and I think it's born out of the frustration the travel industry's actually had with the situation we find ourselves in. 18 months into this, and we're still, with very little activity happening around the nation. So I can get the frustration. I'm just not 100% sure that legal action is the right way to resolve it. It has to be resolved sooner or later, but we all know that court action can take a long, long time. So, I think that'd be a bit of a moot point by the time it's finally resolved anyway.
Thanks so much for talking to us this afternoon, Lyle. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Utah police have released new body cam video of suspected murder victim Gabby Petito shortly before she disappeared. It was during a camping trip with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, who she accused of hitting her.
Don't worry, just be honest. He grabbed my face, I guess. He didn't hit me in the face, he didn't punch me in the face or anything.
Did he slap your face or what?
Well, he grabbed me with his nail, and I guess that's why it looks. I definitely have a cut right here because I can feel it when I touch it. It burns.
The FBI have paid another visit to Brian Laundrie's family home, collecting personal items to help police dogs search for the 23-year-old, who remains a person of interest. House prices around the country are growing at their fastest rate in decades. Costs have climbed by more than 20% over the past year, pricing first home buyers out of dream homes and into investment properties instead. Tom Saker has the details.
Good afternoon. New data suggests the housing market is still skewed heavily in favour of vendors, with the annual growth rate at its highest level since 1989. Hobart and Canberra led the capital city's growth in September, both over 2%, and the average national growth rate was 1.5%, slowed down by Melbourne at 0.8%. Sydney is still well ahead when it comes to median house prices, which is now at $1.3 million, while the average unit price is $880,000.
It is a combination of very low interest rates, relatively low levels of supply. Stock on the market is about 28% below where we'd usually see at this time of year.
The data also suggests first home buyers are struggling more than ever to get into the market, with first home buyer loans down 20%. It means an increasing number of people are turning toward rent vesting, with loans for first home buyer investment properties up 45%. But there is still some light at the end of the tunnel for first home buyers, with the supply set to increase in the coming months, and tighter lending could keep prices in check, with credit growth still far higher than income growth.
It's clear that first home buyers are more price sensitive when we see these rapid rises in value.
Massive savings rates, which have also been at a record high, are expected to drop once the lockdowns finish, which could lead to a market correction.
One of the world's most active volcanoes has erupted on Hawaii's Big Island, spilling fountains of lava and sending volcanic gas into the air. The southern section of the crater lake on Kilauea began erupting last night, creating a spectacular orange glow. Geologists say the lava doesn't pose any immediate threat to nearby properties. Last night, onlookers turned out to get a glimpse of the lava flows. Let's take a quick look now at Melbourne's roads.
Good afternoon, I'm Jess Miller in the Tassal Salmon traffic chopper. Heading into the weekend, having a look at the Monash Freeway. You can see it's humming along very nicely. We were hearing of a crash in South Yarra, Alexandra Abbott Punt Road opposite the Monash, but certainly nothing there at the moment. And driving in towards the Domain Tunnel, you can see absolutely no dramas. Switch your dinner for a protein-packed, hot-smoked Tassal Salmon grain salad, cooked and ready to eat for a delicious boost of omega-3. Tassal, it's Tasmanian for salmon. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again Monday.
One of the biggest bands in the world, the Wiggles, have celebrated their 30th birthday with an online party. The children's supergroup formed in 1991 and have recorded more than 1,700 songs, including this new track, which was released today.
Clap your hands and spin her around. Pat your head and touch the ground. And do the move they call the wiggle groove.
Still got it. The Wiggles promise to continue entertaining children for the next 30 years. Time now for an update on the weather with Jane Barn. Jane, bit happening out there. What's the latest?
Well, Jack, thunderstorms, thunderstorms. So they did pop up this afternoon. Now they've come into the city as well. They bring heavy rain, then move on. In the sunshine this morning, we reached a top of 22. And with calm winds and high humidity, it felt even warmer. But in the rain, the temperature certainly plummets. It's down to 16 now. Here are the thunderstorms outside. They slowly built during the afternoon, coming closer to inner Melbourne. They are very hit and miss, but if you are in their path, the sky turns black and the downpour is heavy. After these, the heavy storm threat in Melbourne is all over. Sorry about the black in the background there. We'll have a bit of drizzle tomorrow morning, then wet weather returns late Sunday afternoon. But in between that, the weekend is looking actually quite nice with lots of sunshine. This looks better in Victoria. We've had another day of rain, showers and thunderstorms. Most of those thunderstorms form during the afternoon. It's all rotating around a low that is over in Western Victoria. It is still there 3 days later, so we still have humid air over us as it's come straight here from Queensland. With all the rain comes flooded rivers. There are 2 rivers in moderate flood and we've got quite a few in minor. Here is the low that brings all of that rain, and as it is cradled by high pressure, it is very slow moving. Now tomorrow, it finally moves away out to our east as the next weather system approaches from over in the west. That is us back to more regular programming, wet weather from the west, so the high humidity will disappear. So tonight, those thunderstorms and associated rain will gradually dissipate during the evening. There it goes. Tomorrow morning brings areas of drizzle into the south, including Melbourne. Then further thunderstorms pop up. These are about the central ranges and all through these parts of eastern Victoria, while the rest are dry. Around the nation tomorrow, fog then sunshine for Brisbane. Sydney and Canberra may still get afternoon showers or thunderstorms. Hobart has steady rain. Adelaide a dry day before rain develops at night. And Perth is showery. To Victoria, with high humidity comes areas of morning fog. We have drizzle across much of the south in through here, then the risk of afternoon thunderstorms around the central ranges here and in eastern parts. There are areas of cloud, but it is dry for the rest. So in Melbourne, it's a grey, misty and drizzly morning for your Saturday, but that does not last. It'll break up to lots of sunshine for the afternoon. It is a top of 17 and it won't feel quite as humid anymore, Jack.
And I'm really looking forward to Sunday, Jane.
Indeed. All of the wet weather doesn't arrive till Sunday afternoon. Enjoy the day.
Finally, a sunny weekend. Thanks so much, Jane. And that's all from the 7 Newsroom for now. Peter Mitchell is here at 6, but from the team, have a great weekend.